Based on my last performance at this forum, I was very surprised to be invited back here. And when I was told 7 minutes on my return to the Bible Belt, I immediately thought, 7 mins, 7 sins. My family have been Quakers for 300 years, and it's probably worth noting that Quakers are not very good on sin, preferring to emphasize the light within rather than the inherently sinful human nature. When you had to swear an oath to go to university, Quakers refused to go, so they put their energy into setting up shop and quickly got a good reputation for fair trading, championing the social causes of the day like prison reform or suffragettes or apartheid. Some might say they were the original social enterprises, like Cadbury's, Barclays, and Clark's. My grandfather was the first generation allowed to go to university, and some say that this was the beginning of the end. Those tight community spiritual bonds were broken by this new generation that were introduced to the expanse of the humanities and the distractions of wine, women, and song. My father, who sadly died this year, found Quaker meeting inconveniently interrupted his weekly tennis game. And although he instilled in me the passion that business could and should be a force for good, he died in rage at the destruction of values and latterly profit. So, here we are, and as Professor Kenneth Reckford impressed on me in these very halls in his seminal class, The Heroic Journey, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the first time. My own sinful journey started with pride. Before we made it to Chapel Hill, the main advice for plucky Brits gate-crashing this beautiful party was to display pride, hide that British shyness, and have a good boast, grandstand a bit. They say pride is the deadliest of all the sins, the root of all evil and the beginning of sin. But confusingly, you know, you don't want to have too big a head on one hand, and yet if you're trying to pretend through false humility that you are not as great as you're supposed to be, then you're committing a sin as well, because you're refusing to live up to the greatness, or as the Quakers would say, the light within, that is inherent in all of us. So even that kind of false pride, that false humility, is itself a sin. And I've been in a pride, logic, humility loop ever since. I guess I'm proud of that. Envy is the most joyless of sins. Envy is a graceless way of communicating an idea that it is, in other contexts, fundamental to decent ambition as well as modesty of character. The notion that we are incomplete, imperfect, and in need of improvement. Envy grows from the legitimate insight that others have something to teach us, mixed together with a degree of inaccuracy and panic about what this might actually be. I was never the smartest or the wisest or the wittiest or the most talented, definitely not the sexiest, and by far not the most interesting, especially swimming in the deep pools of this foundation. And I noted when envy struck. I had to sift through its confused signals and use them to work out my direction and purpose. The solution is not to feel guilty about these attacks of envy, but to use it to help to understand what is truly missing from our lives and what perhaps our true mission should be. My teachers that made such a huge impact on my life here at Chapel Hill ended up having an anthropological and Chinese bent that ultimately led me in a roundabout way to how I think about the world now and what my mission truly is. Thanks to Wang Jun for teaching me about the Chinese sage who wore a Confucian hat, symbolizing your relationship with your community and friends, Buddhist robes, your connection to the cosmos and the 100 lives before and 100 lives after, and Taoist sandals, your connection with nature and your own personal journey through the world. Sidney Rittenberg, who fused socialism and capitalism in my mind, from his adventures to the farthest reaches of both, those spectrums, and generous spirit to which he shared those journeys. And Judith Farquhar, an unparalleled mind in anthropology that pushed me to think against the grain and think about the whole. My year with her studying in Beijing was transformative, and little did I know how it opened my brain to meet the power of feet. Sloth is perhaps another type of fear. We can't bear to get down to our work, because if we apply ourselves with genuine focus, we risk terrifying humiliation. If we really give it everything we might not succeed as well as we'd like to. We might find a task too hard. We may realise we're not equipped to undertake it or be mocked by the world. My chronic deprioritisation centres around dulling down anxieties. When at Chapel Hill, we started a charity called Students for Students, which sponsored kids to go to school in Africa. Many have gone on to do great things, but I've done a terrible job of connecting with it and finding subsequent time to support. Behind my inaction, there is some sense of anticipated disaster, a catastrophizing mind, of ultimately not being able to do enough, so better to do nothing at all. In nearly everything I do now, I begin at last when the fear of doing nothing at all trumps the crippling fear of doing something badly. Greed is a deadly sin and such a big problem in our world today, eating ourselves alive with hunger for power and money, and it brings with it a kind of blindness that causes us to mistake mere wants for needs. It was always hard to understand why I ever left Chapel Hill, and when I did, I seemed in such a rush to get into life. I was greedy for more. I had an insatiable desire, a drive that no matter how blissfully happy I was sitting on my porch on Macaulay Street with the best friends I'll ever have, in a life full of stimulation of body and mind, but callously thought, it's not enough, I still wanted more. And like every middle-class white boy, I was into Wu-Tang Clan in the late 90s. And greed and impatience led me to chase them to set up a business together. Safe to say, Wushu's was the first of my many great failures on my journey beyond Franklin Street, and on reflection, nearly all of the failures I've had in life stemmed from excessive greed. I arrived in Chapel Hill many moons ago in the hot spring of 1995, and lust seems the most obvious of the 7 deadly sins, and also the one that can overcome the unwary soul like a flash flood, planting seeds of temptation everywhere. I launched a whole brand and business based on lust, United Nude, a sexy shoe brand with a Dutch architect precipitated by a relationship with a Dutch architect girlfriend. The embracing of lust and wanting to jump into bed with people was not out of degeneracy, but maybe because I was lonely. Sex is the epitome of connection and acceptance. The so-called bad and erotic things I craved felt so exciting because they were proofs of someone else's open-ended affection, which is in such short supply in ordinary life. Now married, it is an evolution of what we genuinely need from lust, ultimately an acceptance of our messy, complex, and altered human selves. Gluttony. I eat too many dumplings and drink too much wine, not because I'm greedy, but perhaps because I'm emotionally starving, or as my wife would say, emotionally retarded. I want true symbiotic love far more than I want calories. I'm just at a loss of how to express it, accept it, and genuinely prioritize it. So the solution I'm currently working on with the help of my long-suffering wife is not to be told to eat less, it is to discover and develop new and regular sources of small kindness, security, and emotional connection. My excess appetite isn't essentially bad, it has simply been misdirected and hasn't found its ideal target. The road to hell is lined with good intention, which is something I say far too often. I have a kind of wrath for how sinful I have been and now anxious to course correct, manifest in a fear of not fulfilling my life and the wonderful opportunities given to me, not least by this great institution. I don't think my many sins are because I'm a bad person, they are more the shape of unmet needs and not finding better ways of addressing them. I'm on a crusade now to build a new family business that will live up to those original Quaker values. My 19th century Quaker cobbler forefathers set out to emancipate feet from Victorian foot corsets, but then got distracted by 20th century technology and humanity's general misguided attempts to emancipate itself from nature. My mission is to reconnect people with nature through their feet, reverse the public health scandal that most Western children have weak, deformed feet, and undo the myth that underfoot padding does you any good at all. Shoes should let your feet do their natural thing. Comfortable people, they've lost the ability to feel. Their sensations are smothered. They feel no ground beneath their feet, no signals from their path. they won't become revolutionaries. In a world obsessed with ease and comfort, reject the cushioned life, reject the cushioned soul, and experience a world full of feeling. Your feet are made to feel, you are made to feel. In the words of Mos Def, comfortable people don't become revolutionaries. Finally, a shameless plug. I know UNC is in bed with the swoosh, but it's time to stop just doing it and start feeling it. I've set up a discount code at Vivobarefoot.com called MC Feeling It. So long, air souls.